Hello, and welcome to the Freebirth with Jesus podcast by Awaken Birth. I am co-host Alison Collins.
And I am co-host Nadia Taylor. We are radical Christian mothers and birth keepers who are passionate about Jesus and free birth.
On the podcast, we will share testimonies of Christian mothers from all across the world who have free birthed with Jesus, and we'll talk all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Welcome to the Freebirth with Jesus podcast. I'm Alison.
And I'm Nadia.
Today we have our guest Justine with us, and she's going to share her free birth with Jesus stories. And maybe we can start with you just introducing yourself. Could you say your name, your location, and a little bit about your previous births? And then when you're ready, jump straight into your birth story.
Yeah, I'm Justine. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I just moved here a year and a half ago from California. I have 6 kids and another on the way that's due at Christmas time. Yeah, so I guess you also want to know about like when I became a Christian too. But so I became a Christian. I started believing in Jesus and having an understanding of him when I was 11. But I would say that my life was really transformed, and I understood his sacrifice and what his blood really meant in covering my sins and changing me and transforming me when I was 17. And so that was when kind of everything in my life shifted and changed. And I started like looking through the lens of like, how did God create us and how did God create me? How did God create the world? And that really shifted everything in regards to birth as well. So it was a very similar transition that all happened. So yeah, I've been obsessed with birth since I was a child. And then but from my perspective of birth, it was your very typical go to the hospital, get an epidural. Like I didn't even realize that you could give birth at home. That just wasn't on my radar. Never knew anybody that had. I didn't even know what a midwife was. And so it was actually when I was 17 that I started hearing, and my very first introduction was actually a documentary, which I've never been able to find again, but it was about unassisted births. And I was like, this is crazy. Like women are giving birth at home and alone. Like I wanted to be a labor and delivery nurse at this point. And so it's like, that is just what? And so it really like caused me to shift into, like I said, my like lens had shifted and changed. And so now I'm thinking, well, yeah, that makes sense. God designed our bodies and people have been giving birth forever and animals give birth every day. And so why do we do things the way we do things? And maybe just completely question everything. And so I shifted into wanting to become a midwife. I had saved money and was going to go into a midwifery school in the Philippines. And the Lord asked me on an airplane if I could lay that down and give it up to him. And I was like, what? Like, this is my dream. This is my everything. And so, of course, I was like, yeah, you give and take away. I'll give it over to you. I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. This is my passion. It's become everything I want to do. And then a week later, my now husband was asking me to start dating. And we were married 6 months later and we got pregnant on our honeymoon. So it all kind of went together. So I knew immediately when I became pregnant with my first that I wanted a home birth. I wanted a midwife. I was very much like really intense about who I was going to have. And I knew what I wanted or who I wanted, like what type of person I wanted. And I very quickly found an amazing midwife who I absolutely loved. And she was at my birth for my first 4 babies. So that was really great and awesome. I loved her. I have a fantastic relationship with her. But during my 4th birth, I had a really hard pregnancy with her. I had a sewing business at the time, and I was being really sedentary because I was sewing all the time. And as you could probably know, business is also a lot of sitting on the computer and doing things on the computer. So not only was I sewing, but I was also doing admin work, and it really, like, it was really hard on my body to just not be active, and I just didn't have time to be active. And then when I would try to be active, it would hurt, and then I would get hurt, I would have more pain, so then it would make me more sedentary. Anyways, there was a lot of different factors with her or her pregnancy that just made it difficult. And then by the time I was in labor, I had had prodromal labor for 10 weeks by the time I actually went into labor with her. And so I didn't believe it was real. I was like, it's going to end again, just very pessimistic about it. And my contractions with her were like 10 to 20 minutes apart, but very, very intense. So I'd have a contraction and I was like, I know I'm in labor, but then it would be 20 minutes in between. And so I'd be like, well, maybe I'm not, maybe it's stopping. So I was very like mentally, spiritually, like I was just all over the place and very not stable like I had been in my other births. And so I got through transition, and my midwife, who had become very close to me, I think at that point she started seeing me more as like a daughter than like a client. And I was going through transition and I had a really hard contraction, and I reached down to, I was like, the baby has to be, I have to be crowning. This has to be the end. And so I reached down to feel, and I couldn't feel anything, and I lost it. I just, I'm in transition. So I start wailing, and I've never done that in any other birth before. And so my midwife gets down in front of me and she's like, Justine, we're going to go in the living room and I'm going to check you and I'm going to find out what's going on. And she gets up and walks away, and I immediately have FER. And so my body begins pushing. And I'm like, in my mind, I know there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just complaining. I'm fine. But because I trusted her and it's so funny because like I would tell other women not to do this, but in my own moment, I totally did, where I put my trust in her. Not like putting trust in someone is a bad thing, but I disregarded what I knew was okay and believed what she was saying. And well, if she's saying this, then it must be real, and whatever I'm feeling and believing isn't. And I couldn't really even say anything, even if I wanted to at that point, because it was like my body is pushing. And so my body gave one big push. She didn't come out yet. And then after that contraction was over, I got up and walked to the living room and got in a not fully laying down position, but a mostly laid back position, which, like most women, I absolutely hate. It felt horrible. And which I had been in my first birth as well, just with that birth. It was first birth taking a long time, and I had ended up pushing her out in that position. And the whole time I was like, I want to get up, I want to get up. And they were like, just one more push, just one more, and then you can get up. And she ended up being born that way. And so getting back in that position was like, I don't want to be here. I don't like this. But it, again, like I wasn't able to speak to say it. It was like I just trusted that if she's feeling like something needs to be checked, then it must. Even though I really feel like nothing's wrong. I'm just being a baby. Like, and that's okay. But like I just needed to vocalize, like, I want my baby out right now. I'm so done with, labor, 10 weeks of this. So anyway, so I lay back, and she checks me, and the baby was at -1 station. So high up. And immediately, as she still has her hand inside of me, I get FER again, and my body pushes, and she goes from -1 to crowning all in one big giant woof. And so she's like, oh, okay, like the baby's coming out. And so then, it's one of those like really long contractions that goes from one to the next. So I'm not even sure how much of a break there was in between. It just seemed like it just lasted forever, it's funny. That's actually pretty normal for me. All of my births have actually been that way, where once I have fetal ejection reflex, it's kind of like, it's go time, baby's coming out, and there's no like the head's born, now the body's born. Like it's all one and done. And so this was the same, it just was very slow. Like she just moved so slowly. And to the one point I actually yelled, I was like, just pull her out. Like, I don't actually want you to do that, but I was just so sick of being in this slow motion of her exiting. I was like, just finish it. So because, she literally had her hand inside of me as she's coming out, and she caught the baby and she put her on my chest, and everything was great. And she's a beautiful baby. She was actually my biggest. She was 10 pounds, 2 ounces, which was a little bit shocking. All of my other ones up to that point had been in the 8.5-pound range. So it was like, oh, you're a chunk. Although it was funny. I actually, the whole time I remember saying, you're so tiny. She's so tiny. And my husband and midwife were like, no, she's not. But anyways, so I remember afterwards just being disappointed in myself. Like I told my husband, we had actually talked about having a free birth from the beginning. We knew originally, like with our first couple births that we wanted a midwife. We wanted, we never experienced it. I wanted to have somebody there that could walk me through and guide me through when I didn't understand what it was going to be like. And I loved midwifery so much and wanted to be a midwife that of course I want to be around all the midwives. So, but it was after this birth and it was just like a couple of weeks after she was born that we had this conversation where I was like, I think the next baby, I need to have this baby on my own with the Lord. Like, I feel like I'm putting my trust and faith that I have for God in the hands of someone else. And I really need to lean on him and look to him and to what is going on in my body rather than to somebody telling me what's going on. And he fully agreed, which I was really thankful for. So he was in full support. And let's see, how far apart are they? They're 21 months apart. So Abigail, my fourth, was a year when I got pregnant with my next one. And we did still have prenatal care with my midwife because, like I said, I love her. I love spending time with her. My prenatal care really is just talking. I don't do any of the testing or anything. We just hang out and talk birth stories and stuff. So it's like, I get to pay to be friends with you and hang out with you. And so that was fun. And she was in full support of me having a free birth. She was like, whatever you need, if you want to change your mind, if you feel like you need me in the moment, you can call me. She was just amazing. And so I was very confident going into this birth with Allison. And then it was also interesting because during that pregnancy, I had a friend who I had actually met while I was pregnant with her, and she was due just a couple of days apart from me. And so she had a childbirth education class, and she is a believer, so she teaches from a godly perspective of preparing for birth. And she normally does it, she has a recorded class, but she was going to do an in-person one, and she asked if I wanted to join. I, thanked her, but I was like, no, this is my fifth baby. I don't think I need a childbirth course. I think I'm okay. I think I know what's going on. And she was so gracious, and she asked a couple of times, and then eventually she's like, I just really want you to be there. I don't even care if you pay for it. I just want you to be there. I want you to be able to give your story to the other ladies there and help, share and talk and everything. And so I went, and I was so happy to be there. And the first, probably 2/3 of the class were talking about generic childbirth, like what happens, the physiology of it, different positions, all those things that you normally have in a childbirth class. The last third of it was she talked about how we can invite Jesus to our birth and how he can be absolutely very involved. And it was so funny to me because I remember thinking yeah, I never really asked God or asked Jesus what he wanted to do with me in my birth or what he wanted to teach me or what, I obviously believed in him and prayed to him very much so during my births, but I never considered it as part of, the sanctifying journey of a mother. I never considered, what do you want to do in my heart? What do you want to take me through in this journey? And each birth has done something different, but I never thought to ask him or to, invite him to be a part of it. It was just whatever happens. And I thought of birth more as that by this point I felt very, I wouldn't say I'm completely educated on birth, but I felt very I know what to do. I know how to do this. Anyway, so it was very awakening for me to do that. And so I did. So I sat down with the Lord and asked him, what do you want for me in this birth? What do you want for me? Where do you want to be? What is this? What is your will in all of this? Especially this being my first rebirth. And so he just very clearly gave me this picture of me laying down in a field of golden grass, long golden grass, which in California is everywhere. And I'm just laying down, and the grass is blowing side by side, side to side with the wind, like waves. And I just hear rest. I just want you to rest in me. And so my whole pregnancy, I did that. And it was beautiful. It was so special and different from my other pregnancies where I was just going along and doing the things I knew to do. This time instead of doing what I knew to do, I was very mindful to ask the Lord, what do you want me to do? Is there something different you want me to do? And so every day I would have a rest time, a quiet time where my younger kids were taking a nap and my older kids were just playing quietly. And I would put on either the soundtrack of waves or I would listen to worship music. And the funny thing is that the worship music that I kept being attracted to were all songs that had to do with oceans or waves or something to do with that theme. And so I just did that all through the rest of my pregnancy. I think I was probably in a third trimester by the time I had done that course. So it was just the last 12 weeks or so. And so so pregnancy was great, and it was a beautiful time preparing. Oh, the other thing I felt the Lord say is that he wanted me to labor with him and to be alone and to be okay with being alone with him. So with all my other births, I had very much depended on my husband. He is an amazing birth partner. He's always right there next to me. And even if I don't need him physically, like to lean on him or to do something for me, I need him to be right next to me. Even just knowing that he's there and I'm not alone is a big deal for me in labor. But I felt the Lord pulling me to be okay with being alone. And so the whole time I thought, maybe my labor is going to go so fast, I'll give birth when Chris isn't even home. But that's not what happened. But so I was like, okay, like that seems hard for me mentally to think about not being next to somebody. But I know that you're with me. I know that you're here with me. And so I'm not truly alone. And so I was 41 weeks and 5 days, which is normal for me. I usually go to 42-ish right after 42 weeks. And I went to bed and woke up in the middle of the night in labor. And I usually try to like have a couple of contractions to see, is this labor? Is this actually, is it just one contraction for me getting up, or is this real? And most of my labors have all started where once they start, it's very obvious, like this is happening. There's not like a gradual buildup. I don't have a day of early labor. It's like on. And so that was how it was with this one as well. So I had a couple of contractions and my husband woke up to me breathing. And so he knew. And so he got up to go, wash the dishes and clean the living room and make sure that things were taken care of. And he figured he'd just be gone for a couple of minutes like normal. And then I would call him in and need him to be next to me. But I went into the shower, which is the first time I ever labored in there. And I labored in the shower and I turned on my worship music. I kind of went back and forth between the waves and the worship music. And I labored on my own for almost 2 hours. He just left me alone thinking that I would call when he needed me. And I just never called him. And I was completely fine. Like I was enjoying labor. I was in the shower and I was worshiping and just loving on Jesus and having a good time. I wanted to be very thankful to the Lord for labor. I wanted to be in like a state of thankfulness. And so I was really purposeful to like literally say thank you every time I'd have a contraction and be thankful and joyful about what was happening instead of, oh, this is just part of the process and kind of doing my coping mechanism. I was more in tune with the Lord and like leaning into him and needing him and not my husband and not my midwife or not anybody else. It was just me and the Lord. And it was beautiful. It was so beautiful. So at one point I reached down I wanted to check myself just to see what was going on. And the bag of waters was bulging. And so I was like, this is definitely labor. This is happening. And not long later, my husband comes in and he was like, so what's going on? And I'm like, I'm having a baby. It's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, why? Like, it was weird to me that he would question me. He's never questioned that before. And he's like, well, normally you're not so quiet and you always need me. And I was like, I've just been with Jesus. Like I'm fine. And so he was done with everything. So then he was there with me the rest of the time. And he laughed at me. And I did this with my next birth too, but laughed at me because I would go through a contraction. I'd begin the contraction. I'd say, thank you. And he's like, that's so weird that you're like you're being thankful for pain. But like, I was like, but it doesn't hurt. I'm thankful for like this contraction. And I know that this is a good thing, even though it's intense, like it's a good thing. And it's bringing my baby closer. And so he kind of chuckles at me, but yeah, so I continued laboring. I continued listening to my music and continued like leaning on the Lord. And I just like Chris was there with me now, but it was still very much like I was still in tune with the Lord. At some point, I guess there was an alarm that went off. And so one of my older daughters, she heard the alarm and it woke her up. And so she comes in and she's like, oh, it's baby time. So she wakes up her older sister. And so they both come in. And they're so funny. They've been to every birth. I've always had my kids at the births. And they watch lots of birth videos. So they're totally unfazed by birth. And my oldest daughter is obsessed with reading. So she goes and grabs a book and she's reading while I'm in labor. And I go through what I believe now is transition, but also I think that possibly my daughter may have been, I don't know if she's like entirely posterior, but she definitely was in a not great position. So it was the first time I'd ever like truly experienced back labor. And I remember thinking like, oh, I thought I had back labor before. No, no, no. This is back labor. Ow. And so I started feeling like a caged animal. Like I just didn't know what to do. And so I was literally just kind of like moving everywhere and just nothing worked, nothing helped, nothing was good. And she walks up to me with her book in her hand and starts rubbing my back. Like I'm at this point I'm usually very vocal in labor, but at this point was being very vocal, and like she's completely unfazed. Like she's not worried at all. She is just so sweet and rubbing my back and reading her book and doesn't care that mom's screaming or anything. And so that was actually just a really neat, like peaceful moment of like, I mean, I wasn't peaceful, but recognizing that I'm okay. Like my daughter isn't even worried. She's probably, I think she was maybe 6 at the time. I'm trying to think of the ages, but it's hard to go back now and do the math in my head. A little bit later, my friend shows up to help, just to be an extra adult set of hands. She's single and she's not single anymore, but at the time she was single, never had a baby. And so this was her first birth to be at. And she walks in and I just melt in her arms and cried. I don't even know why. I just did. And a couple of contractions later, at this point, I had gotten up and gotten to the bathroom. We had a really long vanity. And so I was standing on the vanity with my hands, like leaning on my hands and leaning over it. And I was having really, really intense contractions. Just, it's the end contractions. And I told myself, if you squat, the baby will come out. And I did not want to squat because I knew the pressure and everything was going to be so much more. And so I was like, no, no. So I have another contraction and the same thing. You know, it's funny because I tell myself that, but it was probably the Lord actually. But again, if you squat, the baby will come out. And I'm like, I'm not ready yet. I'm not doing it. And so another contraction comes and they're so intense. And again, if you squat, the baby will come out. So finally I shakily, like, go down into a squat. And sure enough, Allison, the fetal ejection reflex just full on pushes the baby out in one push. And she comes out onto the floor and she's perfectly clean. Like, it looks like she just had a bath. Like she's so beautifully clean. There's water on the floor and I just scoop her up and I'm like, oh my, it's over. Like she's here. And it was just so beautiful. And we don't ever find out what the gender is. So every time it's this beautiful surprise. And it's so funny because I always have a guess, but when the baby comes out, it's never even something I'm thinking about. It's never on my mind to like, what is it? But it is for my husband. That's like the first thing he wants to know. So I'm, got her in my arms and I'm just in that birth bliss, super high. And I'm, rocking back and forth and saying, my baby. And her umbilical cord was between her legs. And so my husband's trying to peek and I keep rocking. And he's like, can you just stop a minute? I want to see. The cord's there. I can't tell. So he lifts the cord and it's a girl and it's so exciting. She's our 4th girl. We only had 1 boy at the time. So she's a 5th baby, 4 girls, 1 boy. It was just beautiful. And I went and laid in bed. And then Chris called our midwife over just to come meet the baby and to help clean up, which was kind of funny because there was not really anything to clean up. I think they said they had to like get a couple towels, dry up the water in the bathroom, and my placenta came out and it was all clean. And it was seriously the cleanest birth. Like it was weird. It was weird how clean it was. So that was my first free birth experience. And it was exactly what I hoped and dreamed it would be. I especially like contrasting it with the birth before, where I felt like I wasn't able to listen to myself and listen to the Lord and listen to what I knew was okay. And this time it was like not having somebody else there to tell me meant that I had to listen. I had to be the one to listen and to figure it out, even when I felt caged and I didn't know what to do with the back pain. like I had to listen. I had to do different things. I had to stand. I had to move to my bathroom, and I wasn't waiting for someone else to tell me how to do it. It was just a completely different experience. Even though my other births went smoothly as well, this one was just, it was so much more in tune with the Lord. And then my next birth, so I won't go into the whole entire details of his next one for time's sake, but it was interesting, the difference between Allison's and my next one. So in between Allison and my son, I had a miscarriage, and it was pretty intense. I had hemorrhaged during the miscarriage and I passed out, and I had to go to the hospital. And I never hemorrhaged before. I mean, obviously during Allison's birth, it was completely clean. Like there was no blood. It was just very, very clean. So it was very weird for me to hemorrhage. And so then 6 months after the miscarriage, I got pregnant again, and his pregnancy was fine. Everything went really well. And it was probably about halfway through that I think someone even mentioned it to me, what about hemorrhaging? Like, are you worried about hemorrhaging? And I never thought about it before, but I was like, well, now I guess I actually have a history of hemorrhaging. Like, well, yeah, like, should I be afraid of that? And so it definitely instilled some fear in that moment. And so I just brought it before the Lord and asked him, like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to have a midwife present this time? How can I prepare? Is this something I need to be concerned about? And so I did. I looked into it. I looked into what can I do? What can I prepare my husband for? What can I prepare my friend for? And even just like sat before the Lord and asked for like peace and the wisdom to do the right thing. And he absolutely gave it. I had complete peace that everything would be fine. I felt very prepared and very ready. And then I also had, because at the time I was a birth photographer, so I was very involved in the birth community. I knew all the midwives in the area and befriended them, and befriended lots of doulas, and even a birth keeper that lived like 4 hours away. And so everyone was like, I'm here for you. If you need anything, I'm here for you. If you have any questions, if you need me to come, whatever. It was just like this, like, I felt very protected, very like insulated in a beautiful bubble of people who love me. So I wasn't afraid. I completely trusted the Lord, and his birth was not as peaceful and serene as my daughter's or the others. Even though I thought it would be, I thought, the sixth baby, I've got this, it's going to be great. I actually had a mother's blessing beforehand. And one of my friends was praying over me, and she was like, I think your birth's going to be beautiful, but I think you're really going to have to trust in the Lord. And I was like, well, of course. Yeah. It's like, okay. So I go into labor with him. The night before, I said, I think I'm going to go into labor, and I want to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and have the baby by 7 with the sun coming through my window. All of my other births, except for my first, were between 3.5 and 4.5 hours. So that's a typical like time frame for me. So it's like, if I wake up at 3, have the baby by 7, that'll be perfect. And sure enough, I woke up at 3 in labor with him. I had my friend who was photographing it. So I called her, called my mom, and we woke the girls up, our older girls. And I start labor, and labor for the first hour or so was normal. Like for me, it's very intense, and I'm breathing through it. I'm fine. And then I get into, this is also the first time I decided to have a birth tub. So I get into the birth tub. It felt really great, but I noticed my contractions slowing down and I was getting hot. So I got out, and it's around probably like the second or third hour, maybe like 2.5 hours in, that I started having back labor. And it was not like it was not like it was last time, where last time it was, again, I'm foggy on the time frame, but maybe it was like 30 minutes of back labor, and then it resolved, and then she was born. This was the rest of the time. And it was so hard. It was so, so, so hard. I feel for moms who, especially like with their first, have back labor, because as that being your introductory to birth, whew, this is my 6th, and it made me question everything I knew about birth. Like, I had to really, really, really dig deep with the Lord, and I was crying out. And like I said, I'm vocal. This time I was like 5 notches above where I had ever been vocal before. I was screaming and it just wouldn't let up. And normally I don't like counter pressure or hip squeezes. But I was like, I'll try anything, do anything. So my husband was trying, and then I would just the classical thing you see where he would try it, and like 10 seconds later I'd be like, don't touch me, and then come back, do it again. Like I was desperate for anything to alleviate that back. It was like I just felt like my back was breaking. It was just absolutely crazy. And so yeah, I very much so had to dig in with the Lord, and like even just questioning like, why is this happening? And it was like I had this beautiful, lovely experience before, like why isn't it happening this time? And I have and she wasn't just photographing, she's videoing. And so I'm like, she's videoing me, and I'm like, this is not beautiful. This is really crazy. And I'm looking over at my kids, and they're all so sweet, and none of them look scared, but after the fact, a couple of them were like, that was crazy, and they're all watching me, and I'm like, I don't want them to think that birth is crazy. Like, just so all these thoughts, and just really like the Lord just telling me, like, just trust in me, just trust in me. And so I would just lean into him and scream. That's how I got through. I got back into the pool. I don't know, probably the last 30 minutes, I guess. And I was holding onto the handles, and my husband said I was thrashing about in the pool. I was everywhere. And afterwards I felt it. I felt like I'd done a major arm workout. And I don't even know, I don't remember my thought process through a lot of it, if I realized the baby was posterior up until this point, but I had this very like vivid just realization that the baby is posterior. Like that is why this is happening. And I even looked down at my belly, and I had just attended a posterior birth, I think like 2 weeks before this. And I remember the shape of her belly. And I looked down, and that's the shape of my belly, that like indent. And I was like, this baby is turned around. And oh man, it was so intense. And I leaned over the tub at one point, and my husband so sweetly gets down next to me. He's like, you're doing great. Do you want me to call the midwife? Do you want? And I remember looking up at him, and I remember like, why? Like, so I'm fine. It reminded me of that time when in my fourth birth where the midwife, I'm freaking out, or at least outwardly freaking out, and she's like, something's wrong. I need to check you. Like, we need to see if everything's okay. And that's kind of how I felt with my husband, that he was perceiving everything that was going on in which is completely understandable, because like I said, this is totally different than all my other labors and how I was responding. So I get why he viewed it as like, is everything okay? Like, I just need to check in with you and make sure you're okay. But I just remember being so shocked, like, I'm fine. Like, there's nothing wrong. Everything is fine. Even though everything seems crazy, I'm fine. And so I told him, I was like, you do what you need to do. I'm fine. And so he left me alone at that. I don't even know. I don't think he ever called anybody. I think he may have texted them, but he didn't end up calling anybody. He just, we'll see, wait and see. It wasn't much longer. So then I realized the baby's posterior. And so I leaned back in the pool, and I put my hands on my belly, and I said, baby, turn around. And I yelled it. I didn't say it. I yelled it. And I absolutely felt him move, like big, giant move. And the next contraction, my mother had stepped out of the room to go to the bathroom, which this is the second birth that she did that for. She stepped outside to go to the bathroom thinking, I have enough time to go. I can come back in time. And nope, because the very next contraction, fetal ejection reflex happens. And then when that happens, I get quiet. So I'm like screaming this whole time. And now I go silent. And all in one big push, baby comes out. And then the baby's up, and he cries right away. And my mom walks in, and she's like, you're kidding me. And so yeah, he turned and then came out, and no one saw if he came out the right way or not. It wasn't recorded. Like, it was in the water. No one could tell, but I know he changed. Like, I could just that whole big flip right before, and then he comes out, and it was just beautiful and perfect. And the first like week after I had him, I was disappointed, mostly, to be completely honest, probably from a, like, what's the word? A selfish standpoint. I wanted to have this beautiful birth video I was a birth photographer and videographer, and I wanted to show this beautiful birth video, and I was like mourning the fact that I wasn't getting this beautiful birth. And then the Lord was like, why wasn't it beautiful? Like, what's not beautiful about that? Because it was hard, because it was difficult, because you had to lean on me, because it wasn't normal. I think that's beautiful. And it was a beautiful moment for me, because it's true. Like, here I am always encouraging women and telling women that it doesn't always have to look a particular way. And then it happened to me, and I actually had to walk through it and walk through that disappointment of it not happening the way that I wanted it to, but also the Lord having to work through me, and the beauty of that, the beauty of truly having to lean on the Lord. And that birth transformed me. Even after 6 births, he transformed me again and made me lean on him even more again. And so now I love it. I love actually sharing the story of it, of how I walked through what seemed like the hardest thing, like in terms of the way it felt. And I did it. Like, the Lord carried me through. He absolutely brought me through it. I was able to give birth. I didn't give up. I also didn't break, even though I truly, truly understand that comment that women say where they feel like they're going to break open. I thought I was going to break open. I literally thought my back was there's just no way I'm going to make it out of this in one piece. I went through that and I felt it, and it was not awesome, but I did it, and the Lord carried me through, and that was the beautiful part of it. So yeah, that's my birth story.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was, yeah. Wow. You were talking a lot about your back pain, and I was like, that was my last birth, and that was really hard. Yeah. What an incredible, like, opportunity for us to be able to sit here and listen to not just one, but three births, like, just, yeah, so much. And watching the progression of that, and like where God was and where he was leading you, and just your obedience to listening to where he is with you and where you are in that moment. And yeah, that was a real honor to hear that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I take a minute? Yeah, because I was like, that end,
Sorry.
the end, no, don't apologize at all, because the end of your story hit me personally the hardest, because like I said, I shared, my last was, I normally have 3-4 hour labors, and my last was 7, which was so long for me. That's nearly double, if not double my time normally. And it was really hard. And I did have to dig really deep with God. And when you started crying, I was like, man, I'm feeling this. So like, I wanted to birth in my bed, and I want it to be gorgeous. And, and here I was birthing in a pool, and I didn't want to this time. But yeah, it was just trusting in God, and he knew where I needed to be. And I think ultimately God, sorry, I'm probably sharing a little too much, but for me, God knew that I was a little bit maybe fearful of birthing in the water again. And he was just like, no, I'm going to bring you to a place where that fear has no control over you, because you will only ever fear me. I am your God, And so that's why your story right at the end, I was just like, I was here, and it was incredible to hear everything else. And I was so with you on it. But then that last bit, I was just like, oh, this is cutting deep. This is getting really deep for me. So I really thank you for sharing that, and how vulnerable you were in that, because as a birth keeper and birth photographer as well, it's like people want that, women want that beautiful birth, and we can experience that. And I have experienced it, but then why isn't the harder births beautiful, especially as Christian women?
Right.
Yeah, we should be celebrating the moments in our lion's den. God was there with us, and he saw us through. Like, we were uninjured. We were not harmed, because God had us, and that's where our faith is, right? Oh, sorry. So I'm going to take a little moment.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I did have the baby at 7 a.m.
Oh,
I woke up
my God.
3 and had the baby at 7 a.m. So it was exactly like I said. And yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I just love that parts of us feel like we have a pretty easygoing, straightforward birth, that we just think that, I persevered, I stayed on top of my labor, and it was fine. So to think that the next labor or another labor would not go as like that just feels like you're like, what? I thought I learned the first time, or the
Yeah.
fourth time. And yeah, I guess that's why birth is such a mystery. I love reading when Jesus did his miracles because he wasn't the same. He might have prayed for example, like the blind or the deaf, but he didn't do it the same way. He put mud on one man. He told, like it's that I think that's the challenge in the where the risk comes is because he might ask us to do something that seems very odd or strange, but it's us choosing to just trust him and him to, we have to rely on him to follow through. But if it was the same every time, then we would be able to not need him anymore, not rely on him anymore. So it's almost, he is probably gonna tweak it to a degree, some a lot more than others.
Yeah.
So it's good that I'm really glad we found you to interview and just share your story because we love these varieties and that birth isn't the same. And the way that God speaks through women is also different and unique.
Because it's so relational. Hey, like he knows where we are. He meets us in the moment that we're in and in all aspects of our lives. So why wouldn't he meet us where we are in birth? And he knows where we need to be and what we're going to learn through this birth, this pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. I learned so much through my last pregnancy. I had severe HG. So there was a lot of trusting in God and just being like, I'm not taking these meds, Lord. You got to sustain my baby. You got to sustain me. And she ended up being 10 pound, 4 ounce. So she was not without at all.
Yeah.
He just meets us in that moment and it's beautiful because like you said, he didn't the way he healed the blind man in the different stories is like one time he's covering his eyes with mud and another he's just praying and then another he just commands the guy, like not with the blind man, but he just commands the man to get up and pick up your mat and walk. Like he's like, just do it. Like,
just squat.
Just squat.
Just squat.
Just squat. I love it.
You're making this more difficult.
And it's like you gotta just do it. Your faith is here. Let that mustard seed be. Like just squat. Oh, that's beautiful. I love it.
I love that even in like it brings the humor to it, that it's like maybe in the moment you might not have felt it was humorous, but it's like there is some consistency, with the women's stories of however God meets them, whether it is verbally or through a dream or a vision. But it's like he keeps saying, trust me.
He's like, and it's that big idea of like put all of your trust and obedience, especially your obedience in him, because that's like our trust, the action of trust is obedience and the act, like, acting that out. So it's incredible. It's so inspiring. This is why I'm like, man, I hope women who are not even choosing to free birth, like if that's not where God's bringing them, I hope they're listening to these stories just to hear the faith and the encouragement of their faith too. How incredible. Oh, God's good. Love him. He's great.
Yes, he's so good.
Yes. Oh. So I have a couple of like questions to kind of go back a little bit though. So you're on your 7th pregnancy now, due in December.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
That leads me into my top question is, did you always want to have a large family?
Yes. Well, okay. Since we were married, yes. When I was younger, no. But we never had like a set number, but we always wanted between 6 and 10, although I think 7's our good number.
Yeah, because that would be my next question is, are you planning on having more or are you just keeping it here? Like my husband wants 11. So
Yeah.
We're at 5, so we're like just kind of halfway.
Right. Yeah, well, that's a funny story, part of, yeah, my own little journey. But my husband started asking the Lord if when it's easy, I think, I shouldn't say easy, gosh, it's not easy, but it's more common for people to have faith of like not having children and then praying for more. I
Yeah.
think it's a lot harder to have faith in the opposite of when should we not have children. I
Yeah.
shouldn't say it's harder. I think it's just different. And I think it's
Yeah.
just more uncommon. I don't think it's harder. It is more uncommon. You don't hear about women, especially if you're not planning on doing, like, we are not planning on doing anything permanent. And
Yeah.
so our question of when should we refrain, not like entirely not being intimate, but refrain from attempting to have more children. Anyway, so yeah, my husband started asking the Lord after 5 kids, and he was praying in a parking lot one day, and he like actively praying, and this big minivan or big like 15 passenger van shows up next to him, and all these kids get out, and he's like, oh, that's funny, they're like a family like us. And then they get back in the car, and again his eyes are drawn to it. He's still praying, and as they're driving away, their license plate says 7 kiddos. And that's like what my husband calls our kids, kiddos. That's his like
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
Kiddos. And so it was very like he's praying, and then he looks over and 7 kiddos, and we didn't have the van yet, but we were about to. and
Wow.
and so he really felt like the Lord was like showing him like 7 is our number, which was kind of funny. So then I was excited. I wanted another at the time. I was ready for 6. So then we had our 6, but then between 6 and 7, I to be honest was like, I'm done. I'm ready to be done.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm done with baby season. I'm done with the pregnancy, and I'm done with like birth. I could do. I love birth. I mean, even though 7 or the last birth was difficult, like I love birth. But going through all the things I was really hesitant about. So I had a hard time when I became pregnant, even though I knew it was coming. I've been pretty hesitant, and I know this might be a little bit longer, but I actually think this is an important testimony to share. And this is hard for me because I've always enjoyed being pregnant. It's always been a beautiful thing for me. It's my passion. It's like the Lord, my family, and birth. And so I've actually like been really grumpy my whole pregnancy this time.
Yeah.
Been very honestly ungrateful and grumbly and complaining and just unthankful. And I've been having a hard time with it, even though like physically I'm fine. I don't really have any issues. I have your typical pregnancy things that come up, but nothing severe, not like HG or anything. Like,
Yeah.
but I couldn't sleep. I was having insomnia and I couldn't sleep, and which made me even more grumpy, and I would complain, and I was being mean to my children, and just it was just grumpy.
Yeah.
And finally, like I I think I was kind of even just I don't know why I would be mad at the Lord, but I was just kind of like not listening. I'm kind of like I'm grumpy and I want to be grumpy. And finally the Lord like just got to me and was like, how can you be grumpy about this blessing that you wanted? And I was so convicted. And I came with my husband and we had this big conversation. This is just like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I told him, like, just basically confess to him, like, I've had a bad attitude. I talk to my children all the time about choosing joy and having a good attitude. And even when you don't feel like it, but choosing to be joyful. And here I am purposely choosing not to. And I just had to stop and say no more. Like, I am going to be grateful for this baby, even if it's not what I wanted, even if it's not the timing that I wanted, which I think was a bigger part of it than the baby itself. Like, I'm excited for the baby. It's all the things that come along with it. And I just stopped and I repented, and I repented to my husband, and I repented to my family, and I choose to be joyful. And it's been like night and day. I have not had a night of not sleeping since then. I have literally slept every night. And I was going like whole nights without being able to sleep, and now I'm sleeping, and just the joy it's so different. Like the rest of the last 4 weeks has the way I've been experiencing pregnancy has been so completely different than the beginning part, which I'm sad that my attitude made that first part unpleasant. But I'm also grateful that the Lord changed me, that He is working in me, growing me. And now, like, my family, I mean, it's just so crazy that the shift in our home, just by me choosing to be grateful and thankful, even though it's not my plan or my will, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so that all comes along with that seventh thing. And
Yeah.
just, it's been a big deal. So
That's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. Because I feel that like you kind of think, oh, I wish it was easy. But again, it's like, even with your last birth, it's like in the midst of it where the hardship is, God's still there. And
Yeah.
it might feel like we're isolated. It might feel like we're alone, but we're not. And he is still speaking. And it's easy to just go, I don't want to deal with that. And I've experienced times, and I have, had other people share with me that in that hardship, they're like, they know they can hear God and they know that it's going to bring that joy, but they're so stuck, like their heart is like somewhat hardened, and praying over that hardened heart, so because you know that God's going to bring that joy. He's going to flip that around. He has that power. And especially when he's telling you that's what he's going to do, but you're ignoring it, and you are choosing to be grumpy. And so choosing joy is really, it is a blessing when you're in it, but it is so hard to choose it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you have all of the mum guilt, like, oh, like maybe I'm a bad mom and maybe I'm not going to love this baby, or maybe I'm, and all of that enemy talk, right? And it so doesn't have any place in our home and in our minds at all. But it's so common for all of us women to experience that, and mothers to experience that. So finding solidarity with other faith like believers that and mothers that God is there, and he's listening, he's able to pull you out. And sometimes we do need that extra support. Hey.
Yep.
Yeah. So that would kind of make me have a question that I didn't have, is how long have you been pregnant? Like what's the age of your eldest?
My oldest is 11 and a half.
Okay. So that's a long time of like babies and breastfeeding, I'm assuming, and pregnancy. Yeah, that's not a small feat.
And how old's your youngest?
He's 2.
Oh, okay.
So I've been pregnant or breastfeeding for over 12 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. Which it's been great, but I'm ready for the next season.
But isn't that a testimony to God though? And like that your husband having headship over your family, is that God knew that this pregnancy this is where you're going to be like, okay, I'm feeling okay to be done. And I'm just going to enjoy now the rest of my pregnancy and enjoy my kids that God has blessed me with. And what an inheritance, like 7 kids, like that's no small feat at all. And
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And pregnancy is really, I find like pregnancy can be hard, not even just like when I've had HD or whatever, but pregnancy, you don't, especially at the end, like you don't have your full range of movement, and you've got all these other kids that you want to love and you want to be like a whole mother to. And so it is that juggle of being pregnant and thankful for the blessing, but then also you already have these children that you have and you want to look after them. And then the whole judgment of the world, they're like, oh my gosh, you have 7 kids. Wow.
Yeah.
I get that with
Absolutely.
5.
Oh yeah. I started getting that, especially when we were in California with 4, being pregnant with having 3 little ones. Another.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Just wait. I'm not done yet.
No, not done yet. I'm like, I'm going to have 1 million. Take it. Get over it. And when you were talking about your pregnancy, your birth with Abigail, her being 10 pound 4, 10 pound 2. Yeah. A big question that I've had, because I had a 10 pound 4 baby, is tearing. Like there's this idea that a big baby equals big tearing, and that little babies equal no tearing. And it's like, no, no, that's not it at all. That hasn't been my experience. And it's not the experience that I hear from many women. So I wanted to see what your experience with tearing has been with her. And then even if you had any tearing with your others, especially with that full, like the fur baby coming all out at once, like people would be like, oh my gosh, like she's gonna split open. Like, yeah.
No, the only one I tore was with my first. It was just a first degree tear. I think I had like 6 stitches, which I probably wouldn't do now, but all the others I've had maybe like a paper cut type.
Yeah.
But it's
These
the
little
same spot.
grays.
Yeah, I mean it's just teeny tiny. It's maybe like an eighth of an inch. It's so tiny. And then it's all the rest, no tearing. And all of them can make that quick, fast burst.
Wow.
Like it. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love hearing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my first 3 were around 8.5 pounds, and my last 3 have been 10.2, 9.14, and I think James was 9.13.
Yeah.
He was my husband. I can't remember who. You think I would know his weight the freshest, but I don't. It was right around the 9.14 range. So
yeah. And so in the Australian weight, that would be anywhere from like 3 to 4 and a bit kilos. Yeah. Your weight range of your babies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good size baby.
Yeah.
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 They're healthy.
They are. Yes. And I mean, I also carry them to 42 weeks. So they've got all their time they need to gain all the weight. But
yeah, well.
And with Abby, I was on my leaning back with her, and I still didn't have problems with tearing.
I know you shared where your 6-year-old with Abigail, she came and was reading her book and just rubbing your back. That was just the cutest thing I ever heard.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh. Have you had all of your kids involved in every birth, or is it kind of just let them come as they go, or what's the experience?
So they've always, they're getting older, so they've become more involved. Especially my first 2 are girls, so those 2 especially have become more involved the older they've gotten. The only time I ever didn't have a child at my birth was when my first son, for Abigail's birth, actually. He was very, very clingy, and he was 18 months when she was born.
Yeah.
And so he was just very clingy, always on me, very in tune with my emotions. It's funny because both my boys are like that. My son now, who's 2, is the same.
Yeah.
And so I actually had a friend come and get him just so that I wouldn't have to worry about him being clingy to me in the middle of it all.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I've had them all. And I don't know that, I probably won't do that with James, the young one now. I think he'll be fine enough to be around. So yeah, they didn't really have many jobs to do, but they're all they want to be there. They want to see. Around. They love watching birth videos. Yeah, they love.
Yeah, I love that.
Things to be born, and we have a tradition where my husband cut my first cord, my mom cut my second, and then Samantha cut the third, and then the next one cut the fourth, and so forth. So
that's
it'll
cute.
Be the 5th baby. It's her turn to cut this one's cord.
That's cute.
So yeah, it's a fun thing. They all remember it, and they all talk about it. No, you cut his cord and I cut hers. And
we do something similar because I cut Aurora's cord, my husband cut Ezra's cord, and then Aurora cut Zol's cord, and then my husband cut Zion's cord. And so and then with Bella that we just had, Ezra, our second child, he cut that cord. Yeah, that's cute. It is cute. Yeah, and speaking of boys, I find that because they have to learn their emotions with their mum, and then they become men. And that's not to say that men aren't emotional. It's just they regulate their emotions very differently. And so that saying of mothers create boys, but fathers create men, it's that's the process though, is that our young little toddler boys, they need their mom to help build those emotions so they can understand them and feel them and build empathy and all of that. But then when they start getting older, they get into that man role, and that's where dad comes in and helps them in that sense. Yeah. So I found that all 3 of my boys they're all 3, because I've got the twins are 2. They just turned 2 yesterday, and Ezra's 3. So they're all like toddlers and very clingy to me and my mom because she lives with us. So yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. I will add that I just love that how even though we are not medically trained, and it amazes me how at our births there might be a moment where we feel oddly to change position or to have a nap or attempt a nap or something like that. And it is easy when we've got a midwife or someone professional there to kind of, oh, is it okay? Like, do you think it's okay if I do this? Or what do you think I should do? Or what position should I be in? And instead of trusting our bodies, and like when you, with all of the births that you've experienced so far, and yet to a degree, like you said, they're pretty consistent, and how you labor and things like that. There was still unique parts about it, especially with them, like, with from posterior. And I just hear time and time again, no matter how many birth videos we watch and stories that we hear, the enemy, in a sense, will try so hard to sneak in just the right thought to make us question.
Yeah.
Like, especially that fear mongering. I mean, imagining the women in the hospital too, of when they're more likely to hear, your baby's going to die if you don't do this or you don't do that. And so to be put ourselves in a free birth scenario type thing, it's like,
I mean, to go along with what you're saying in terms of the enemy and the fear, I never really like finished that thought in regards to the hemorrhage with my last. I didn't bleed at all. I mean, obviously there was some blood, but like in the water, it was completely clear. I even delivered the placenta in the tub, and it was completely clear all the way down to the bottom. You could not see any. It wasn't even a pink tinge. Like, so to go from, it was very similar to my fifth, where it was just such a clean birth. So to go from hemorrhaging and passing out in this like really crazy experience, and then fearing that hemorrhage, it's like that was a thing that the the Lord having me work through in terms of having faith in him, but also the enemy trying to like, well, what about hemorrhage? You've hemorrhaged now that's in your past. So is that something?
Lock it in.
Yeah, and it was like, no, I let it go. I release it. And if it happens, I'm ready, and I'm ready to trust in the Lord and take possession over that. And I didn't, not even close. Like, I was so far from that.
You probably questioned, do I even have blood inside me?
I know. Well, I've seen it enough of it on the outside that I know that I do. But yeah.
Well, and on that,
contrasting experience.
On that, with your bleeding, if you don't mind sharing, how is your postpartum like bleeding? Like, is it like light or heavy, or do you go for a long period of time? Because that's another thing that we don't talk about, is some women are like, oh, well, I bled for like 8 weeks straight. Or some are like, I bled for like 8 days. And, like women it's just like pregnancy, birth, and it's all different. That's right.
Yeah. I typically bleed for 2 weeks, and it's, heavier on the first day. I'll usually have some clotting, but nothing significant or scary. And then I think maybe like 2 or 3 days is like the most intense in terms of comparison. And then it's just light for the next 2 weeks.
Wow.
Which was completely different than my miscarriage. My miscarriage, I bled for 2 months.
Whoa.
And it just lasted forever. Like, it would not stop, and it would stop for a day or two, and then come back. And I thought I might be getting septic, and I went back into the hospital.
And what about your after pain? So like, obviously I think this might be a great person to ask, because having 6 babies and you're on to your 7th, is that everyone says, oh, like your second is going to be like, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse every baby. And I'm like, okay, how bad does it get at the end here?
For me, that was true for the first 5. So the first one, not so bad. And it did get worse, and the days longer. And then with my 6th, I mysteriously had hardly any.
Nice.
I don't know why. I didn't do anything purposefully different. So I'm not sure why, but I have that. I remember my midwife telling me that, and I was like, I'm not going to believe that. I reject that. But then
I rebuke you and I bless you.
Yes. But my secret weapon is the After Ease tincture by Wish Garden. My husband's like, even if it's what is it called?
Placebo.
A placebo. He's like, it doesn't matter, it works. So I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Even if it's not really doing, which I do actually think it is doing something. I don't believe it's placebo, but even if it was, I don't care. It works. So,
yeah, because and so you said like with your fifth that was where you were doing sewing, or was that your fourth? I'm sorry.
My fourth, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because I was wondering if because I found that my after pain and my recovery time was weird with my last. It took a lot longer with her, but I had severe back pain, all of the things, and HD and all of that. So I'm wondering if it was like just all of those things encompassed together. But then randomly, I think I was 4 weeks postpartum, and then I don't know, God was like, fake it till you make it, girl, and just stop speaking it into you and stop speaking it over your postpartum and go and exercise. So I started MMA and was doing that at 4 weeks postpartum, and I feel amazing. So
Lord, we just thank you for Justine and for giving her the courage to come on and share her story and be vulnerable and with all her birth stories and her journey so far. And thank you for her unique story and the journey that she's been on from her first birth to almost number 7. And just bless her and bless her testimony, that every woman that does get to listen to this episode and meet her would just be moved and challenged by your relationship that you revealed with her during her births, and even the challenges and the trials and things that made each birth slightly different. You walk with us at our own pace, and you reach out your hand to guide us and to remind us that you'll never leave us at any part, and you'll help carry us through. It's a big, leap of faith, but you won't ask us to do anything that we are not capable of. And we just pray, that Justine's testimonies of her births that she's had so far would just be an encouragement to the women listening, and whether they're currently pregnant or for their future pregnancies, would be able to use these examples, listen and recognize your voice and your spirit, and having that discernment to completely trust in you, even when it doesn't make sense, even when it might be easier to reach out for help, that you would guide us. And it's not to say that we should never ask for help and never have assistance at our births, for example, but that every decision that we make, we involve you and we invite you into it, and just to make sure that it isn't coming from fear, but it's coming from something that you've placed in our hearts to do. And I thank you just so much that her stories and her journey has been able to show so many examples of that. And we just thank you for today and tonight over there, and our evening, and the times that we spent doing this episode away from our families. And thank you so much, and thank you for Justine. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to the show. Tune in next week for another episode of Freebirth with Jesus. To share your story on the show, check out our website and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at awaken.birth. Don't forget you can watch this episode and more on YouTube.